No, she's stole this up here. So that's my main character, Gash, and he's the half orc. He's the main guy,
Mhm.
and uh that's his friend that he befriends, and she winds up owing a life debt to him, named Mara. She's just a regular human, but there's actually more to it that's going to be revealed in the next book.
Nice. And then in your short story, Synth, the reason I had you hold that up is because Synth's main character is a girl, and then she's got a bot with her who's kind of like her warrior, her Gash sort of.
Yeah, I'm getting an echo,
Oh no.
replaying
Okay.
the sound that we just said.
Oh, okay. I'm guys in the chat. Are you hearing any echo? I'm pretty good on my end. So hopefully.
Oh, I know what's going on. I'm sorry. Okay, I had a
Okay, we're
YouTube
good.
going. Okay, we're good. Okay, I'm sorry.
Right.
Can you ask the question again?
Yeah. So in your short story, Synth, your main character is a female, a woman, a girl. Well, she's a young woman, right?
Yes.
And she has a bot with her who's kind of like her big warrior, sort of like Gash, but he's a bot and he's in this story and he's helping.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that correlation. That's interesting. I I guess I'm not very original.
No, hey, we're drawn to the same kinds of characters, and I think that's a pretty common trope to have a main character who has a secret weapon best friend.
Yeah.
That's a fun story. That's something that we're kind of looking for, is to have that best friend who's also like our secret weapon. Do you have someone in your life who's kind of like that for you?
I would have to say my wife. My
Yeah.
wife, because that's the thing that really attracted me to her, was that she would get my brain going like no one else could, and she just made me start thinking more on things. And it's like, wow, it's like, how do you do that? And um, she helps me. The Bible says that the wife is a helpmate, and she's really like the essence of that for me. And I wouldn't be pursuing a full-time writing career if not for her pushing me to do it.
She's your secret weapon and
Oh
your
yes,
friend.
yep, my
Oh,
best friend.
I love that. Yeah. So tell us about Synth. What was your inspiration for Synth?
So I always like the idea of sentient AI, not in real life, obviously, but in fiction. And there was anime called Armitage the Third, which I wouldn't recommend. It's a lot of garbage in it, but the concept was pretty cool, and it was about this cop who was what's called a third, which was a type of robot that was basically human. And so I want to take that type of character, and put it into a Star Wars universe and see what happened. And then I threw in Trax, who's like a combination of K2SO from Rogue One and uh, KRS-88 from Galaxy's Edge. So I love both those bots. So there I was like, cool. And then I set them in an adventure for her to figure out her purpose, and her being a synth and what it means to be human, and her being able to appropriate what it means to really be fully human, as much as a synthetic being can be. And it was kind of the genesis, or the test, or whatever you might call it, for the space opera saga that I'm planning on writing next year, with Kelsey as a main character. So that was the inspiration behind it.
So you have characters who have different kinds of consciousness. You have fully human, biological human characters. You've got synths, and you're kind of exploring what synths are and what it means to be a synth. And also you've got bots. How do you get into those different kinds of characters that, you are human, right? You're
so.
also kind of imagining what the personality of a bot would be, or a synth.
I think that well, they're all just characters mostly, but I think when I differentiate between bots and synths, or bots and a normal human, like a bot, I have in my mind that a bot is a certain personality, and they don't deviate from that ever. So you see Trax, you read what Trax says. He's constantly making satirical jokes or using sarcasm, and he's so he's using that throughout. And he never really deviates from that. He never has conscious thoughts of who am I or where am I going in life. He just like does what he's supposed to do and comments on it as he sees fit. And but whereas Kelsey, the synth, she is musing, she has wondering, she thinks about things that are outside herself. She has a theory. She can think on not ethereal. What's that word? Not non-solid concepts, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But so the bots are like a specific personality and a specific set of parameters, whereas a human or a synth would be, able to just change and grow over time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the barriers I have in my mind concerning that, and I just try to write the character, still make a bot a character, but within those confinements, and then allow the other characters to grow and change.
And then, what exactly are synths?
So synths are a type of robot that a scientist created that had emotions and look completely human and act completely human, and they even have they are self-aware, self-conscious, and they can blend in society. But he created them in secret because he was being hunted by what's in the story, the Federation, because they thought that him creating that would spark another a war that between humans and robots, which already happened, which I hinted at in the story way back in time. And she's created using, I don't know if I should spoil, I don't want to spoil.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's what she is, and she's perfectly fine with that until she runs into this girl who's changes everything she knows.
Yeah. What I kind of liked about your story is that you have completely different characters and completely different consciousness, and yet they're all finding that they have this common, I want to say common humanity, but like, the bot isn't human, but still there's this common connection. There's a common drive to look out for each other. There's to do the right thing, to find their purpose.
Yeah.
Their meaning. Like even the bot, he wants to do what his purpose is, what he was kind of made to do.
Yeah.
But definitely the synth, that's part of it. There's a lot of team drive to be on a team, and drive to help the team. And I think that's kind of the message that we're all looking for right now. I think in 2019 and going into 2020 is we're looking to be on that team. We're looking to connect, and we're looking to see that our barriers are not that big. Right? That we might initially look really different, and we might initially look like we're in different camps or teams or whatever, but actually we can all be friends. We can do this. It's there.
Yeah.
I like that in your story.
I'm sorry?
I like that in your story.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's always been a big thing for me is I grew up with, I see the racism of people around me, or the divisions, of people just based on whatever.
Right.
And I always disliked it. Even when it's in humor form, I just didn't much care for it. And it's really, you boil us down to our basic units. We're all the same thing. We don't really deviate that much. There's a book by guy named Ken Ham. I don't know if it's a book. I know I think it's a book called One Blood, and it just talks about how everyone's descended from the same people. So we're not really that different at all.
Yeah.
And so, and I always enjoyed the idea of a group and people coming together for one purpose and achieving a goal. And I guess that kind of leaked in unintentionally.
Unintentionally. Yeah, that was my next question. Was did you have that in mind when you were kind of generating up the story before you started writing, or did it just kind of accidentally just kind of happen? It was just kind of there.
Yeah, most of my stuff accidentally kind of happens because when I write a story, it's always focused on the characters because the characters are what drives me, and I think it's what drives a lot of readers. But I have attention deficit disorder, and that tends to make you less cognitive on
Mm-hmm.
things, because cognitive is hard to hold on to thoughts and they just kind of drift all over the place. So a lot of my stuff is a lot more intuitive, and I'm doing things I don't really quite realize I'm doing it. But then I go look back, or I hear someone like you talk about it, I'm like, oh yeah, that makes sense that that's in there.
So it's almost like you've got different thoughts running at the same time and different processes kind of running at the same time. Do you find that you've got some kind of extra superpower that you're honing? The more you write, and the more you work on your writing crafts, the more that all those thoughts are becoming a strong point for you.
Yeah, I think so. I think that it's because it's intuitive. It's not something I can like say, okay, I'm gonna do the 3 act structure. I'm gonna put this there. Now I could do
Mm-hmm.
that. It'd be a
Mm-hmm.
lot harder for me to hold on to, but I think if I just write naturally, I learn as I write and as I read, and it kind of seeps in the back of my mind and
Mm-hmm.
kind of mixes around, and it kind of forms this almost like this database that I pull from randomly, or to my eyes randomly,
Mm-hmm.
but it actually makes very logical sense once the story's written out.
So take us through your writing process, like from idea generation to getting it out. Like what does that look like for Luke T. Barnett?
Okay, so either I'll come up with a concept or a character,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll start just kind of daydreaming about it. And once I get like a scene or something like that, I might start writing out that scene. And I have no idea where it's going because I pants like crazy. And um, I just write until I get stuck, and then I might jump to another project, or I might just try to think out what I want to happen next. And what I've been trying to do lately is to write faster. I just write out what I'm thinking at the time,
Mm,
and then I'll go. I used to write and edit as I wrote, which took forever.
right. Yes.
So I'm just trying to write now, just go through and then go back and clean up the whole thing later. And then I have to go through and find the technical parts that are like, okay, well, this guy left at this time and he has to arrive at this time, or this line of logic has to be this way. And then I have to go through and take time to make sure those are right, which takes a lot longer for me. But it's definitely worth it because then it makes the story more believable. And that's about it. I just try to make sure the characters are. I do try to think about some of those things, like making the characters distinct,
Mm-hmm.
making the speech patterns at least somewhat distinct, or at least consistent within themselves. Um, and I try to make sure that it's building, not consciously necessarily. That's more intuitive, but I do try to make sure that there is that build and that climax at the end, and
Mm-hmm.
that, like with Synth, um, that there's an explosion at one point. And originally I didn't have it in there, and I thought, no, there needs to be this moment of, oh no, what happened?
Yes. Yep.
So I had to add that in there consciously. So I have to scan for that stuff after I've written, because if I
Right.
try to do it while I'm writing, it's just going to get all jumbled and it's just not going to work.
Mm-hmm. So step one is coming up with the main idea, and then when you visualize or conceptualize a scene that really grabs you, you just start writing that out. And then from that, you add to the story until the full story's finished,
Mhm.
and then go back through and kind of figure out what the missing pieces are. Now, I know Rose, your lovely wife, she plays a role too. Is she like your first reader, or is she someone that you bounce ideas off of? Like,
Yeah. So I'll throw ideas out to her, and I'll write something up and think, oh, this is really cool, and I'll go and read it to her after she's done doing what she's doing. Because usually I'm very bad timing, and I try to tell her while she's doing something. But then I'll read it to her, and she won't ever say it's good or it's great or anything like that, but she'll give me critical feedback, like very constructive criticism,
mm-hmm.
and I count on her for that because her brain works a lot better than mine does, and she can see logic a lot better. And I read the precursor to the space opera trilogy is a book called uh, oh, not my mind. Oh, Silicon Heart,
Hmm.
which I've started writing. I actually wrote some this morning, but I wrote out the prologue and I read it to her, and she said she said, okay, wait. So this, and this and that. I'm like, yes, that's right. And she's like, well, what about this and that? I'm like, oh yeah. So she helps me see the flaws in my story.
And figure out how to make it stronger and how to make it better.
Yeah, just fill in the missing pieces and like, make it make sense. Not like a duh. What about this? It's like, oh yeah.
That is really cool. That's kind of like if you're putting together a puzzle, someone who can put in those last pieces in the puzzle, and then the whole thing works together.
Yes, she's very good at that. Very good at pointing out where I'm coming up short, but in a loving way.
Yeah. And how are you planning on turning this story Synth into a bigger novel or a series or continuing it?
Yeah, well, so it is the same. I'm going to use the characters in my space opera series.
Mm-hmm.
I want to try to work it so that I can fit the actual short story into the series somewhere. If not, I'll probably try to um, change a little bit so it does fit or something like that. But the character of Kelsey is going to actually start in the Cyberpunk series of Silicon Heart. You'll see her in there, and then it's going to carry her through into where the series is going to split into two series. There's going to be a Star Trek type series, and there's going to be a Star Wars type series, and they're going to happen in two different universes, or two different galaxies. And then those galaxies are going to come together in this big clash, but they're going to have like little incidences of going back and forth before that. And I'm going to carry the character of Kelsey all the way to the end, and she's going to wind up being like a major factor in saving the day. So she's going to wind up living like thousands of years.
Awesome, because she's a fun character, and I want to see her grow. She's got a lot to learn, but she's funky. She doesn't quit. She keeps trying, and she's got a lot to learn about who she is and where she came from and why. All of that.
Yeah,
I love it. Now we've got a couple people watching us live. If you have any questions for Luke, go ahead and throw them in the chat. I had a question, but then I forgot what it was.
that's okay. It looks like Shadow has a question.
We do have Facebook user said, I heard he's secretly James Patterson trying to break into the mill sci-fi market. Is that you?
I wish, then I wouldn't be have to work at night.
Yeah, that'd be great.
That'd be sweet.
And Shadow says, does your wife help you make sure character actions match each character, or are you able to keep each one separate on their own? That's a good question.
Yeah, it's good. It's a very good question. So she doesn't necessarily do that for me unless she sees something blatantly obvious.
Mm-hmm.
But usually, if it's that point, I notice it too.
Right.
Like I'll start to write something, and then I'll look at it like, oh, that character wouldn't do that, even though it makes sense for the story. It's like that character would do that, so I can't write that. It's just not, and it might not be something that's explicitly stated in their personality, but something that I know their personality well enough that I don't go there with that.
Yeah.
And the character personalities are interesting because I decide things on a whim for them. But I make sure it's a staple in their personality. I don't necessarily bring it up a lot or at all, but I know who they are when I originally conceived them. And there might be little tidbits along the way, but I know who they are. And so I know as I write it that what they would do and what they wouldn't do. And so I have to structure the story around that because otherwise it doesn't make sense.
How do you come up with them? Do you think of people from a movie or people in real life or people in other books that you've read, or whole cloth? You just come up with them whole cloth.
Yeah, all the above. So Kelsey, well, let me. So like I said, Trax was based very much on K2SO and Crash. Yeah. But Kelsey, other than the concept of her being a synth, her personality was totally made up. I just imagined her this tough as nails bounty hunter that just loves her bot and isn't going to back down from a challenge. And so I used that as a basis and moved forward. And there's other characters I've had based on like in space opera. There's a samurai type assassin who's based loosely on Suzuka from Outlaw Star. And but then I've written other stories where the characters aren't based on anything at all, and they're just made up completely. My character Gash, he was a D&D character, but when I made him, me and my friends were putting together background stories for each of our characters. So I came up with this backstory of who he was, and that's who he was. I mean, there's no personality in role-playing games and pen and paper role-playing games necessarily. You have to come up with that on your own. So I just came up with that by itself. So it's a myriad of things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wherever you find them, you get them in your story and then see what they're going to do. Are you one of the types of authors who likes to like throw trouble at your characters and see how they respond?
Sometimes I just really like the story to like kind of go as it's going to go, and I try to put obstacles in the way so it doesn't seem too easy for them. But I don't want to like I don't like the stories where a character is just running into problem after problem after problem after problem after problem, and you're just not seeing resolutions. It just gets bogged down. This bogged me down. There's a really good fantasy novel that I read that was I won't name it, but it's there's this one point in the story where the character is just like having problem after problem, and he's just like okay, well, let's just keep going. And it's like I didn't want to read this anymore. So I just skipped a couple of chapters, and finally he got to like where things were improving. I'm like, okay, now I can keep reading. So I don't want to bog them down too much. I need to give them joy, failure, and success,
Mm-hmm.
in equal amounts, and give them those worries and those fears that we all have.
Yeah. I love the Harry Dresden File books so much. They're probably my favorite like fun time reading stories. But a couple of those books, Harry just doesn't sleep for the whole book long, and it's trouble after trouble after trouble, and I just feel so bad for him. Come on, when can you ever get some rest? But Jim Butcher does not let that poor guy rest.
Oh man, I don't know if I could read that.
I love them. Love them. Anyway. All right, speaking of love, Jay Clifton Slater said he loved your story.
Yes, thank you, Jay. It's awesome. I liked yours too. Yours was good. It was very thriving.
Both of those were very fun stories. Okay, and Shadow the Illustrator says, how in depth do you go with your world building before you write your story, or do you build it and change things as the characters grow?
Yes. So, mostly I make it up as I go. But then once I make it up, I determine in my mind to make sure that that's a static thing. So, like with magic systems, Sanderson has these 3 laws. You want to have these 3 rules in place so that it's structured. And then there's soft magic systems where they just make up whatever. Well, when I make something up, I want to make sure that it's balanced.
Mm-hmm.
And no one is overpowered or anything like that. Everyone has limitations, even if it's not explicitly stated. So, like, it's the same thing with the world. So, if I establish a way of things in the world, then I want that to be constant. So, in Synth, let me see if I can think of an example from Synth. So, in Synth, I made up a thing called a jump drive, and she activates it at one point, but then she's too close to another ship. So I could just say, okay, well, she activates jump drive and she teleports away and everything's fine. But no, it's like there's rules. You can't be too close to another ship.
Mm-hmm.
And so it could possibly kill them if she activates it at the wrong time. So
Right.
I made that up as I wrote it for a way to get out, but there's a cost for her to get out.
Right.
So I don't, like I said before, I don't want to make it too easy. I want to make sure there's a challenge around almost every corner, but not insurmountable or constantly piling on.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if I got too off track with that question.
No, that's exactly right. So it sounds like you have a basic idea of what your world is like, and maybe you come up with some rules before you start writing. But then, as you're writing, you're figuring out more of how your technology works and more of how your world works, how your magic works. And
right.
And you could sometimes paint yourself into corners and then have to go back and rewrite stuff. But that's what editing's for. It's fine.
Yes.
That's what the editing stage is for.
I have done that before, and it is. I can only go so far with the cognitive of world building, and before I just have to start writing, and just make it up as I go. And I have written myself into a corner sometimes, like, okay, well, that's not going to work. So I either have to go back and change it, which usually I don't. Usually I just try to come up with a new rule that would allow it to work, but still not be like, oh, I may wave the magic wand, plot armor. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to do that.
Yeah, Rick's here in chat, and he says you don't want to pass right through a star with
Yep.
your drive.
Yep.
Or bounce too close to a supernova.
Ah, those are no big deal. Just don't trip.
Boy. Oh.
No, I have supernova shielding.
That would end your little trip real quick, boy.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, oh, good.
And asks, do you prefer fantasy or science fiction for world building?
I think I prefer fantasy. Fantasy was always my first love, and I feel like there's more freedom in building that. I feel like science fiction, there's more restrictions because it's based in science, so you have some kind of logical, if nothing else, you have logical restrictions that this doesn't work or that doesn't work, but also scientific, pseudo-scientific restrictions. But I feel like science fiction for me, the world building is almost already completely done anyway, because my stuff is like I like Star Wars, I like Star Trek, I like Armitage, Outlaw Star, all these different media of science fiction, and it's like those are all tidbits of ideas that I can use to build my own world. Not that I just completely steal from them and don't come up with anything of my own, but I feel like science fiction as a genre is more established in where you would take it than fantasy, because I feel like fantasy can be different from book to book and still make a lot of sense. I've read some sci-fi stories that it's like hard to grasp what they're saying because it's so different from other things that we know.
Yeah. Well, a lot of the fantasy stories are kind of like a medieval type world. They often have a feudalistic society, feudalistic economy.
Yeah.
But not always. It doesn't have to be. And I guess it's the same with science fiction. Like there are recognizable worlds, there are recognizable governments and basic story structures for fantasy and science fiction. But then there are a lot of authors who do something within the genre that's their own thing, and that's very different looking.
Yeah, and that may be my problem too, because again, that's like cognitive understanding of what they're saying and this new concept that they're coming up with, and I have trouble following that sometimes, whereas other people may not. Not that I dislike the story because of it; it's just harder for me to dig through.
That's true. When you've got a fantasy story, for example, where all the species are made up and completely made up, like we're not talking about elves and dragons and stuff.
Right.
Vigorthos and vigor moms, and you're like, what's a vigor mom?
Yeah.
Describe it to you now, and then you got to keep it in your mind every time you meet a vigor mom on the road. That could be a little confusing. All right, Jake Clifton Slater, he's curious about your writing process. He says, tough to ask without a spoiler, but how does Luke create stream of consciousness?
I'm trying to remember what he's talking about.
So stream of consciousness writing is when you just let your brain kind of wander where it's going to go, and the words flow out through your fingers and you just kind of follow them wherever your imagination takes you. You put it down on the page and then edit it later. But in your first draft, you're just letting your thoughts out.
So how do I create from that process?
Maybe like how do you create a story with stream of consciousness kind of writing? Or do you create a story with stream of consciousness writing?
Yeah. So yeah, I just create. I write. So I do that. That's basically pantsing for me. And I just take the story where it seems like it makes logical sense for it to go. And if I find it's conflicting with another part of the story, I will either won't go there or I'll change that back part of the story to fit what I'm not going. Like in Silicon Heart, originally I had these two police officers investigating this space exploration manufacturing company, and then I changed it to an actual bot manufacturing company when I got further in the story, because I realized that's what they want. I want them to investigate is robots, not spaceships. So I really just take it where I want it. Sometimes I have a goal, and eventually after I write so much, I have to figure out where it's going, and so I try to make a goal. So I'll try to aim towards that goal, and then uh, as the story comes out, I don't necessarily just strictly go in a certain direction. I kind of like just have like guardrails of that goal acts as guardrails for me, or the theme of the story. That's something else I did mention before, is that a lot of my stories, I'll think of a theme
Mm-hmm.
that I want for that story, and that theme will guide the story as it goes along. My second book that I'm writing now, Half Orc Kindred, it's the whole idea is kindred and relationship and stuff like that. So all the interactions, all the scenes, the whole theme of the story is kind of guided by that principle. Although what actually happens is kind of like made up as I go.
So the idea of family or kindred or friendship is like your North Star, and then you let your ideas wander for your story wherever they're going to go, but you kind of always try to bring it back to family. So whatever the conflict is that comes up in this scene, you're thinking about family or friends, or how can friendship be strained and tested? How can friendship conquer and overcome? How can friendship be put through the ringer and then the characters still kind of work their way through? Sort of like that?
Yeah, something like that. So it's more like if I have that in the theme in the back of my mind, then as I find that as I write, the things I write naturally tend to follow those guardrails. And then if sometimes I'll see an opportunity where I can jump on, like emphasize that particular theme or that piece of story, and it'll I can more directly shoot the story in that direction. But mostly it's more that intuitive thing. It just the story is guided by that back in the mind thought, and it just comes out that way.
That's cool. So do you think you're becoming a stronger stream of consciousness writer, or a stream of consciousness writer who's learning how to plan more?
I think I'm becoming a stronger stream of consciousness writer. I now for the space opera trilogy, I'm really trying to plot it out, not plot it out, but to really get some good ideas down and some timelines down, because I feel like it's more, if I mess things up, it's just going to be a disaster because it's so massive. But for the most part, it's just stream of consciousness. Have that theme, have those characters established, and then just go right and just see where it goes, and then adjust as needed along the way.
Cool. So you're a writer who's been writing for years. You're a writer that I've read a couple of your stories by now, and I've seen a lot of growth and progress in your writing. I'm really excited to have you in the anthology. I'm really excited to include Synth in the anthology. I thought it was a lot of fun. I loved it right from the start. I'm like, wow, this is great. This is a great story. And you know, I worked with the Galaxy's Edge guys, so I did recognize a lot of things, and maybe that's part of why I loved it so much, was because I thought, you know, I love Galaxy's Edge so much, and I'm seeing a lot of the fun stuff that I love in those books. I'm seeing in the short story too. So I've seen a lot of growth. Do you have one final thought that you want to leave to the audience, particularly for authors who feel like they're on their writer's journey, that they've got a lot of they're growing right now in their writing and their craft? Is there any like final tips or word of advice or encouragement that you want to leave the audience?
Yeah, don't allow yourself to remain stuck. I mean, everybody gets stuck, but don't stay there. You know, find a way to break through. When I get stuck, I just start writing, and it just kind of breaks the dam. But whatever you do, don't leave yourself stuck. Don't give up, and don't stay down. Don't think you're never going to make it. And it may take years. It may take me years. I don't know how long it's going to take me, but just keep doing what you love. And if you don't love it, take a break from it. You don't have to do it, but find what you love and do it. And if it's writing, great. Just stick with it, you know, and don't burn yourself out. But, you know, do it as much as you love it, and commit to doing the difficult parts like marketing or whatever else you need to do. If you can cognitively manage that, and just always do your best and always have fun with your writing. Like Nick Cole and Jason Osponch said, just play with your G.I. Joes in the dirt, you know, have fun with your stories.
That's awesome. Yeah, have fun with your stories, Luke, and have fun with your stories, audience. Thank you guys all for joining us today on Keystroke Medium, and I look forward to seeing what you write in the future, Luke, and to our audience too. Join us next time for some more reading, writing, and everything in between right here on Keystroke Medium.
Bye. Thank you, Lauren.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.